What are the scariest moments in Disney movies? I've looked across the 58 feature-length animated movies Disney has released, and these are my top 10 scary moments. Well, hello there! My name's Jeremy and welcome back to Freeform Disney, where I talk about all aspects of Disney, from the animated movies to the theme parks to Star Wars, Marvel, and Pixar, and the TV shows, and everything else in between. And that is why it's Freeform. And keep coming back every day for new daily content. If you're not subscribed yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Now on to today's topic. My top 10 scary moments in Disney animated movies. And first off, spoiler warning for a bunch of Disney animated movies, but none within the last 5 years. We've reached the end of Snow White week, and my inspiration for this list came from my very first video on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, where I talked about Snow White and fear. Fear was a major theme in that movie, and it is today's topic in the form of scary moments. Little piece of free advice. If you're ever interested in making a list like this, don't spend a few hours watching all the scariest moments back to back to back. I did that, and trust me, it really starts to get to you. First, a quick honorable mention. While there were many scary moments and Disney animated movies which missed the list entirely, and it was a tough list to make actually, the one that was closest to making the list was actually Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. If you watched my first video on Snow White, you probably know there are quite a few scary moments in that movie. It might actually have more scary moments in it than any other Disney animated movie. My number one scary moment in Snow White is not the hag, it's not the huntsman with the knife, it's the iconic scary woods scene. The one where Snow White runs through the woods and everything keeps getting scarier and scarier. Trees become monsters, logs become crocodiles, and vines become snakes. In the end, she becomes so overwhelmed she collapses. And Disney takes us with her on that journey, building up our fear as hers increases, even though we know it's not real and it's being magnified. And that's why it's an honorable mention for me, which just barely misses the list. So without further ado, on to the countdown. Number 10. I tend to find musical numbers make scary moments less scary in Disney movies. That's why you won't see things like Heffalumps and Woozles from The Mini Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, or Be Prepared from The Lion King, or Friends on the Other Side from The Princess and the Frog on my list. There are exceptions, and number 10 is one of those exceptions. My number 10 scary moment in a Disney animated movie is Pink Elephants on Parade from Dumbo. The song is kind of an acid trip that Dumbo is on. As the song progresses, things get weirder and then scarier. The colorful elephants and elephant faces against the black background help make it feel even more nightmarish. The scariest spot for me is when there is a whole elephant monster made out of colorful elephant faces coming at us as the audience. Dumbo is having a nightmare, and Disney decided we get to experience that nightmare with him. I love elephants in real life, but I'm not so sure about these colorful imaginary ones. Like the song says, I can stand the sight of worms and look at microscopic germs, but Technicolor pachyderms is really too much for me. And that's why it's my number 10 scary moment. Number 9. My number 9 scary moment comes from The Fox and the Hound. If I were to make a list of my heartbreaking moments, this movie would probably make that list as well. It pulls at my heartstrings. And all of that ends up leading to a tense climax where Copper, the hound, and then Todd, the fox, are fighting a grizzly bear. And I suppose Amos Slade, the hunter who owns Copper, is there too, but I don't really like him because he hates poor Todd, and if you want to hurt Todd, then you can go get mauled by a grizzly bear. That aside, the grizzly bear is a big, scary animal, and even for us humans, grizzly bears are huge and threatening. You really don't want to get on the wrong side of one. And of course Amos goes and shoots it in the shoulder, just pissing it off more. So Copper has to go in and protect him. and it's nail-biting as you're worried for Copper. And just when it seems Copper is cornered, there comes Todd to the rescue of his old friend. But a fox versus a grizzly bear is hardly an even match. And the fear only comes to an end after it hits its climax when the two are on a log over a waterfall, and the bear strikes toward Todd only to break the log and send the log, the bear, and poor Todd off into empty space. It's a high-tension fear filled with mortal peril, and that's why it's my number 9 scary moment. Number 8. There are many scary Disney villains, but this one would probably win the contest against any of the others. No, it's not Maleficent, it's not Cruella de Vil, it's Chernabog. Fantasia was a movie with many shorts within it set to famous classical music. The piece with Chernabog was the final segment of Fantasia. It used the haunting song A Night on Bald Mountain as its background. Chernabog is a giant demon who lives on a mountain and is said to have the powers of despair and death. He summons minions to go carry out his works. If you wanted to create the scariest, most demonic villain you could for Disney, Chernabog is exactly what you come up with. Adding to the fear is that he feels unstoppable, that he has no motive you can try to subvert or avoid. He's like a force of nature, a dark, evil, twisted force of nature, and it's terrifying. And that's why Chernabog and his section of Fantasia is my 8th scariest moment. Number 7. Number 7 is another exception to my comment on musical numbers and scariness, and the only other one that actually even cracks my top 10. Given all of that and what I've already said, you might have guessed it. It's Hellfire from the Hunchback of Notre Dame. On top of being an amazing song, one of Disney's best and most powerful, it also ends up being one of the big, scary moments in Disney animated movies. We watch Frollo descend further and further into madness over his obsession with Esmeralda. The fear for me in this scene is of Frollo himself, as he gets scarier and scarier. The imagery finds an interesting mix of religiousness and cult, with plenty of fiery reds. The music only serves to heighten all of this. This is Frollo, who will burn all of Paris if he cannot have Esmeralda. And this is his descent into madness. And that makes him scary. Especially here in this scary moment from the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Number 6. This will be my only repeat movie in the top 10 as we revisit Fantasia once more. And I'm okay with that because Fantasia is really a collection of separate stories, short films all tied together in an anthology. This scary moment comes from the Life on Earth piece set to the song The Rite of Spring. Disney set out to be scientifically accurate to the best of their knowledge at the time, and they did a surprisingly good job for the time. And even better, it made for a compelling piece of Fantasia. Now, you might think the specific moment I'm talking about will be the T-Rex chasing the other dinosaurs or fighting the Stegosaurus. And while those are scary, it's not the scariest part for me. For me, it's actually just after that, when there's no water to be found anywhere, and all the dinosaurs are migrating to try to find any water, any food, any chance of survival. While I imagine many people would pick the other moment, this one is scarier for me. The scary part for me is the utter hopelessness. They are staring at their own mortality, fighting to survive, and there is nothing whatsoever that they can do to actually save themselves. Even the T-Rex and the other dinosaurs are traveling together because their fight with each other no longer matters. They're just faced with growing doom, and there's nothing they can do. That helpless hopelessness is quite scary to me, and it makes this my number 6 scary moment. Number 5. Darling, it ain't always better down where it's wetter. Number 5 comes from The Little Mermaid, and it's a moment that has nothing to do with Ursula, the villain of the movie, nor does it have anything to do with that shark that chases Ariel and Flounder. This is all about a scary moment between Ariel and her father, King Triton. This is the destruction of the Grotto scene. Ariel is in her grotto with all the who's-its and whatchamacallits she has collected from the human world above, and she's admiring her statue of Prince Eric. Then Ariel's dad bursts in on the scene, and during the exchange that follows, she blurts out that she loves Eric. And this causes Triton to completely lose it. He goes into a rage and starts destroying all of Ariel's possessions, all while telling Ariel, of course, that he's doing it for her own good. Anyone who has ever had a parent do anything similar to this should understand the pain and fear that this brings. As the audience, we feel Ariel's complete helplessness as she sees her most cherished possessions destroyed around her. And at the same time, she's scared of her parent as well, lest he turns that rage directly on her. This is terrifying, and it sits at my number 5 scary moment with good reason. But we're in the top 5 now, and it's only going to get worse from here. Number 4. Number 4 is probably the most traditional horror-style scary moment on this list. From the adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. In the second part of the movie, Ichabod has an encounter with the Headless Horseman in the woods on his way home. And the Headless Horseman is straight up the stuff of nightmares. The lighting and the coloring of the Headless Horseman by themselves are scary. The relentless pursuit is harrowing. And that sword glimmering in the moonlight carries a terrifying promise of death. This is straight up typical horror movie fare. Heck, it's the kind of scene I would be surprised to ever find in a Disney animated movie within the last 30 years, as it would feel completely out of place. Disney just doesn't put this kind of horror moment in their movies nowadays, and hasn't for a while. And that certainly earns this a well-earned spot in the top 10. Number 3. As much as there is a gap between the top 5 and the rest of the field, the top 3 are all in a distinct category of their own when it comes to scary moments in Disney animated movies. I'm starting with a movie that most people probably expected to make this kind of a list, Bambi. Failing being chased by the hunter's dogs is definitely one of the scary moments there in that movie. But this is all about the Meadow and the hunter. We are shown the Meadow 3 times in the movie, and the third time is when Bambi's mother dies. But the Meadow is super creepy even from the first time we see it. When Bambi's mother stops him when he's about to joyfully and innocently go into the field, and that fear we see on her face, the cold direness with which she tells Bambi about the danger of the Meadow strikes right through me. And the music changes as well, and it's haunting. And this music happens every time. The atmosphere is there each time we see the Meadow. And each time the Meadow is more terrifying than the last. The third time is the worst because everything is heightened even more. There's this giant feeling of unease and dread. And then it happens. She tells Bambi to run. Then a shot rings out, and it's terrifying watching them run. And when Bambi is told not to look back, the fear ratchets up even higher. And then there's a shot that kills her as Bambi keeps running, unaware of the awful truth that we as the audience know, that she's dead. These Meadow scenes are scary, and I'm certainly not alone in thinking that. I'm sure this tops many people's lists. Heck, it even traumatized our own Han Solo, Mr. Harrison Ford, as a kid to the point that he didn't watch movies again for years. And one last thing I do have to mention before moving onward is that music. It very much reminds me of the music in Jaws, and is just as scary. When it comes to making scary moments, what we see here in Bambi, this is how it's done. Number 2. The most recent of Disney's animated movies to make my list is Fantasia 2000. While there are some scary moments in recent Disney animated movies, I don't find there to be as many, and the ones there are just aren't scary enough to make this list. But Fantasia 2000 certainly does. Specifically, this is the last piece, the Mount St. Helens piece, the Firebird. This is the Disney animated movie that has given me the most nightmares in my life. This scary moment really got to me. I get pulled in by the life dryad sprite as she goes around the forest and the mountain, and then she can't bring life near the mountain, and so she goes to look a little bit closer. She goes all the way up into the crater inside the caldera and finds this center spot. And when she gets there, then the volcano suddenly awakens. and it is a Firebird. But not like some nice phoenix. Oh, no. This is some Firebird with rage and hatred, and it is full of death and destruction. The juxtaposition of her innocent, happy life against this raging, hateful death makes all of this that much scarier. She flees and tries to escape, but there's no escape. The lava surrounds her everywhere, and it is hopeless. She is helpless to save the forest, helpless to save the animals, helpless to save any of the life around her. She can't even save herself. And then, inevitably, she dies. Even talking about it right now brings up some of those feelings of fear. Disney wanted to make something in the vein of the Chernabog scene at the end of the first Fantasia. And for me, they massively succeeded. I've always loved this piece, even if it drove as many nightmares as it has in my life. And at one point in my life, this would definitely have been my #1 scary moment. Number 1. What can possibly top the Disney movie that has given me the most nightmares in my life? You've probably guessed it since it hasn't come up yet. The crown for this top 10 goes to The Lion King. The Stampede tops this list. It starts with the peril we know is waiting, as we're aware there's a giant herd of wildebeest right at the top of the gorge with the hyenas lying in wait. The scare starts big right off the bat. The music instantly cues us that danger is coming. The stampede starts, and then the camera zooms in for a super close-up on Simba's terrified face. He knows what is coming, just as we do. Mortal peril. Almost certain death is coming. And what can Simba do to try to stay alive? It doesn't seem like he has a chance. The wildebeest stampede into the gorge, and it is so scary. Mufasa comes, and the stampede is beating him up now too. He finally gets Simba out, but then he's pulled right back in. And watching Mufasa get pulled back in, that is terrifying, because we know the mortal peril. We've seen what it's already done to Mufasa by this point. Surely this will be his death. But then he bursts out and he makes one last desperate climb to get out of the gorge. And at the top, he pleads with his brother. He pleads for his life. Mufasa, the strong king who doesn't seem to be afraid of anything, who is larger than life, who has the voice of James Earl Jones and is just so cool that he can't die. Mufasa has a look of terror in his eyes. And that chills me to the core. And the worst moment is when it becomes clear Scar is going to betray and murder him. That moment right in Long Live the King, where the realization hits both Mufasa and us as the audience. The whole scene knows how to ratchet up the fear and then let it release a little just so it can ratchet it right back up. And that makes it even scarier. And it is a master at doing that for us. And the stampede, which was terrifying even at the beginning, only gets scarier as the scene goes on. While this may not have given me the most Disney nightmares in my life, I can say I definitely think it is currently the #1 scary moment in a Disney animated movie for me. I love Lion King. It's one of my favorite movies. And this scene right here, this is the scariest moment that Disney has made yet. Whew. That was a bit of a list to get through right there. Get to relive a little bit of that as I go through. So what are your top 10 scary moments in Disney animated movies? Did I miss any of your favorites? Let me know down below in the comments. I'll always try to respond to everyone's comments as best as I can. So thanks for watching. If you liked it, please give it a like and share with anyone else who you think will like it as well. Coming up tomorrow is going to be my first ever Disney news stories of the week. Have a magical day, and may the Force be with you always.